Good morning. I hope you are fine. Today we are going to talk about communication. Are you ready to start? Well, the topic for today is communication. Let me share the information with you. Can you see it? Well, here you are. What is communication? You know what is information? What is the meaning of communication? Just think about the answer. What do you usually communicate? In this presentation, we are going to talk about the different concepts of communication, and also we are going to talk about the different means of communication. And finally, we are going to talk about models of communication. But let's start with the concept. What is communication for you? Think about your answers. Who do you usually communicate with? We usually communicate every day. We communicate with our family, with our friends, with our pets. Everybody communicates with everybody, or most of the time. Communication is defined as the process of understanding and sharing meaning. Whenever you communicate, you give meaning, you give a message to somebody else. What do you usually communicate? Think about the answer. What do you communicate? You communicate news, you communicate feelings, you give information, you request information. We use communication to share information, express our feelings, comment, ask questions, express our wants, and express our needs. We express our feelings. We develop social relationships. And that's why we communicate with one another all of the time, in our house, with our family, with our neighbors, in the school, with our classmates, with our teachers, with our boss. We communicate with everybody every day. Communication is much more than wants and needs. Based on these ideas, we need to create opportunities to communicate for a variety of reasons. There are several reasons, and you communicate every day. We use communication every day in nearly every environment, including the workplace, whether you give a slide, head nod, an agreement, or present information to a large group, or only when you're talking face-to-face, person by person. Communication is absolutely necessary when building relationships, sharing ideas, delegating responsibilities, when you are managing a team, when you are working together in the school in a team, and much more. So you use communication every day. Learning and developing good communication skills can help you succeed in your career. It can make you a good competitive candidate and build your network. While it takes time and practice, communication and interpersonal skills are certainly able to be built. So you can increase your skills and you can refine your skills if you work hard. If you identify your weaknesses, you can make them and be stronger. there are four main types of communication. Can you tell me what are the types of communication? There are four main types of communication we use on a daily basis. The first communication that we use is, what am I doing right now? What am I doing? I'm talking, and this is verbal communication. And also, as you can see, I'm moving my hand, I'm moving my eyes and my body. That is not verbal communication. Written communication and visual communication. Let's take a look at each of these types of communication. As I told you, verbal is when you speak, when you talk to each other. Verbal communication is the use of language to transfer information through speaking or sign language. If you have seen the programs in television, you can see that they use sign language. Or probably you have seen somebody using sign language. This is also verbal communication. Verbal communication is one of the most common types, often used during presentation, like this one, video conferences and phone calls, meetings, and one-by-one conversations. Verbal communication is important because it is efficient, it's practical, and is fast. It can be helpful to support verbal communication with non-verbal communication. So you usually use both to reinforce the message. Non-verbal communication is the use of body language, gestures, and facial expressions to convey information to others. It can be used both intentionally or unintentionally. For example, whenever you smile unintentionally, when you hear something, or when you hear a joke, that could be intentionally or unintentionally. When you hear a pleasant or enjoyable idea or piece of information, non-verbal communication is helpful when trying to understand others' thoughts and feelings. So whenever you move, you are giving a message. With your eyes, you are giving a message. With your hands, with your movements, we usually send messages to other people, and that is non-verbal communication. Written communication. Written communication is the act of writing, typing, printing symbols like letters. Here you are, a letter, and numbers to convey information. It is helpful because it provides a record of information for reference. Writing is commonly used to share information through books, pamphlets, blogs, letters, memos, and more. Here you are some examples. Email. Nowadays, we usually use emails instead of letters, instead of messages. We use WhatsApp, and chats are a common form of written communication in the workplace. And probably is the most used for you and the most useful. Visual. Visual communication is the act of using photographs, art, drawings, sketches, charts, and graphs to convey information. You usually use this kind of visuals when you are presenting a topic, when you are giving information, and you want to help the other person with the information. Visuals are often used as an aid during presentation to provide helpful context along written or verbal communication. Because people have different learning styles, visual communication might be more helpful for some to consume ideas and information. So sometimes it's clearer than only verbal or non-verbal communication. And here we continue with the types of communication. Could you tell me an example of visual communication? We have already explained this information. Now I want you to tell me an example of visual communication. Can I have a show of hands to see your examples? Okay, a picture could be a good example. Another example, a graph. Okay, and what about written communication? Again, I want to see a show of hands. An example of written communication. Make up, now continue with verbal communication. Make up an example of verbal communication. And also make up an example of non-verbal communication. Okay? Do you have your examples? Well, you are going to show me the examples next class. So be prepared with the examples, please. Why are they important? Why is communication important? How can you improve them for success in your career? How can you improve your skills in communication for your career? Or to succeed with your family, probably, or with your friends? Or the opposite, how can they affect you in your career or in your life? Write the answers. You are going to share the answers with me and with your classmates, obviously. Next class. There are several different ways we share information with one another. For example, you might use verbal communication when sharing a presentation with a group, and you might use written communication when you are applying for a job or when you are sending an email, when you are writing a message in your phone. There are 8 essential components of communication. Can you remember one? Remind me the 8 components of communication. In order to better understand the communication process, we can break it down into a series of 8 essential components. What is what are the main elements in communication? Do you remember? Do you know? Here you are. Source. In this moment, I am the source and you are the receiver. But remember that this can change most of the time because you are changing information. You are giving information, you are receiving information, and then you might be the source or you might be the receiver. You are exchanging information most of the time. And also another component is the message. You are giving information, which is the message. That is the message that you are giving to the receiver. And feedback. Feedback is the reaction, how the receiver reacts and the answer he gives to you. The channel is the mean that you use to give the information. The environment is the place. The context is everything related to the moment. Interference is noise. Sometimes you don't understand the message because of the noise. Here you are, the source. The source creates and sends the message. That is the sender. The sender of the message is the source. And as I told you before, you are sometimes the source and sometimes the receiver because you are exchanging information. The message is the information sent by the source for the receiver, or in this case, for the audience. I'm giving information, I'm sending messages to the audience. I'm the source and you are the receiver. The channel is the different ways for a message to travel between the source and the receiver. In this case, which is the channel? The computer, the internet is the channel. The receiver, as a receiver, you listen, you see, you touch, you smell, and you can taste the message. And then you interpret the information. You interpret the message. Feedback, when you respond to the source intentionally or unintentionally, you are giving feedback. It's your reaction, in other words. Environment, the environment is the space where you send and receive messages. And the context is the circumstances that form the setting for an event. Interference is also called noise and can come from any source and have the ability to block or change the intended message. Researchers have observed that when communication takes place, the source and the receiver may send messages at the same time, often overlapping the information. So they are trying to talk almost at the same time. You, as the speaker, will often play both roles, as a source and as a receiver. Let's continue with the models of communication. The first one is the transaction model of communication. Transaction. The words. Transaction model of communication. And as you can see, you have the source and the receiver, the message, the context, social context, cultural context, relationship, that is a relational context, physical and psychological context, that is the way they are feeling in that moment. So the transactional model of communication, researchers often view communication as a transactional process with actions often happening at the same time. So you are giving information, you are receiving information, and that is a transaction process. As if you are in a bank, you are giving money, you are receiving money, you are giving information, you are receiving information, and you get to the point. That's why it's transaction. And the other model of communication is constructive model of communication. We have the source and the receiver, and remember that sometimes the receiver is the source might be the receiver and the opposite. Researchers have also examined the idea that we all construct our own interpretations of the message. This model focuses on the negotiated meaning or common ground when trying to describe communication. Whenever you're talking about something, you try to negotiate with each other. and then you try to interpret the message. That is the purpose of this model. Now, to conclude, let's say, as a summary, we have, as a summary, researchers often view communication as, we have already mentioned that, as a transactional process. You are sending information, receiving information, giving more information and receiving more information. That is a transaction process. There are 4 kinds of communication. Can you remind me the 4 kinds of communication? What am I doing? Is verbal communication. And now this one is non-verbal communication. And I am using this drawing, which is visual communication. And written, I'm writing a message to you with the homework. That is written communication. The communication process involves understanding and sharing meaning. And it consists of 8 essential elements. Do you remember the elements? It consists of 8 essential elements. The source, the sender, the source is the person who sends the information. The message, the information that I am giving to you. The channel, the means that you use to give the communication, sometimes it's the ear. The receiver is the other person who interacts in the communication. The feedback is your reaction. The environment is the place where you are. And the context is also related to the context, to the situation, to the culture. Interference is the noise that might be present, or probably the way of speaking that might interfere in the communication. The models of communications are the transactional process in which actions happen simultaneously, and the constructive model, which focuses on negotiation and shared meaning. If you have any questions, you can tell me in the next class. But now, you have to continue with the tasks. You're going to do it in pairs or in teams. And there are 4 activities, so you can divide it into 4 people together or 5 people together and do any of them. The first one is for team number 1. The second one is the team number 2, 3 number 3, and 4 number 4. And if you need to repeat, you can choose any one, but try not to repeat more than 2 times. If you could design, number 1, if you could design the perfect date, what activities, places, and or environmental cues could you include to set the mood? Please share your results with your classmates. In this case, if you want, you can act it out or just explain in your team, so you prefer. Number 2, what assumptions are present in transactional model of communication? Find an example of this model of communication. A situation in your house, a situation in a workplace or in the classroom. Provide examples and also provide examples of the components of communication. Task number 3 is for team number 3. Remember, observe 2 people talking. Describe their communication. See if you can find the components and provide examples. And finally, task number 4, and that is for team number 4. How does context influence your communication. Consider the language and culture where you grew up and the role these play in communication styles. And here you are some more reference in case you want to find out more information about the topic. Well, dear students, that is the topic for today. So please study again, or if you need, listen again, watch the video again. And also, the most important, do the activities, because we're going to check the activities in next class. See you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.